Okay, so we're getting into our next project. We're continuing talking about the organ systems. We're still looking at the organ systems that are primarily the four tissue types. Okay, skeletal system is connective tissue, muscular system is your muscle tissue. Now, one of the things that makes us, that lets us be classified as animals is we move at some point in our life cycle. We can get up and we can move ourselves around, okay? And that's where the skeletal system and the muscular system comes in, all right? Part of the functions of the skeletal system is in movement. Primarily the muscle system, that's what it does, is it is movement. Both of them help provide support. And so we're gonna look at how they maintain homeostasis individually, but we're also gonna look at, and what this project really gets into, is how do those systems work together? If you remove one, the other one can't function. If the muscles work on the bone, so like right now, if you reach over, you pick up a pencil when you walk out of class, your muscles are acting on your bones to allow those movements to take place. If you remove the muscles, there's nothing to move the bones. If you remove the bones, the muscles will work, but there's nothing for them to work again, so they just sort of sit there and twitch, all right? And so that's where the project comes in. And so what you're gonna do is you're gonna create a working model of one of the 6 major types of synovial joints. Now, one of the things we're gonna get into is that the definition of a joint is a lot broader than we are familiar with. Most of the time when you think of a joint, you're going to be thinking of your shoulder, your elbow, your knee, wrists, ankles, stuff like that. Parts of your body that move around, right? And so you're going to make a model of one of those. And you're going to have to tell us what the bones are, which skeleton, axial or appendicular, the muscles responsible for the movement of that joint, the ligaments responsible for holding the joint together. You'll also end up having to describe the range of motion, right? So if you pick a hinge joint, how is the ankle, for example, an example of that? How is the hip an example of ball and socket? That sort of thing. You'll also end up creating a visual that corresponds with that. So you'll have the model so you can show the movement, and there's certain parts you'll need to be able to point out the different parts. But for greater detail to really see what those parts are, that's where the visual comes in. It can be physical, like a pamphlet or a poster. It can be digital, like a digital poster or a website or something like that. You can do a mixture of the two, with QR codes, augmented reality, that sort of thing. Depends. It just depends on how savvy you and your group feel. As far as presentations are concerned, we're upping the ante on this one. You're presenting to a panel of experts, doctors, nurses, physical therapists, physical therapy students, stuff like that. People who are more familiar with what is going on with these joints than your average student or a high school science teacher, okay? You're going to be evaluated on how accurate your model is to the actual joint and how well you identify and explain what the different structures are, okay? Next week, I'll randomly assign a joint type to you, and then from there, you'll pick an example to model. The final presentation is going to be live, can be live or pre-recorded like the previous project. Now, the panel we're presenting to most likely will be virtual, because I don't think they're going to let us bring people on campus. Which frees up, which gives us some flexibility, because now if one of your group members at home has materials, expertise, or whatever to build the model, they can do that at home and we can still present it, okay? It is important, though, that each group member has an equal part in the presentation. And so part of the reflections we're going to be adjusting this time around is you will be detailing what your part was. And then with the peer assessments, you'll be evaluating yourself and your group members, how well did they fulfill that role? So if Brad is supposed to be the model builder and he builds the model and he nails it, great. Or if he dropped the ball and he didn't bring the pieces together and so now you don't have a model, not so great, but you'll be detailing that. Questions so far? Individually, there's going to be a unit test over skeleton and muscles that will open up the week after presentations are due. You'll also have benchmark and final reflections and peer assessments that we go as we go through, and then the final wrap up. Benchmarks, if you're writing these down in the calendar, these are also in the project calendar in the project launch folder. First benchmark is next week, where you give me the characteristics of what your joint is. A definition, how does it move? Give me an example. Then layer that on. Within your example, you will determine the bones. So like if you have elbow, which is an example of a hinge joint, what bones make up the elbow, this area right here, or the knee, or the fingers, or something like that, okay? Then third layer on top of that, the muscles and tendons and everything else. Okay, so what are the muscles? What's the origin and the insertion? We don't know what those are yet, but we will once we get to that point. So the muscles responsible for this, the muscles responsible for this, which is actually a separate joint. The muscles, if you're doing hip, which are the ones that let you move your leg forward and backward, side to side, that sort of thing. Final project presentations will be November the 12th. Submissions will be the night before. The test will open up the week after that, starting the 16th. And like I said, all of this is in the calendar. So if you want to go back and fill in the calendar and see what it is that we're doing, you can do that by accessing the project calendar in the launch folder. Questions? In that case, then go ahead and get started with the group contract and knows and needs to knows. That's pretty much all we're going to have time for. I do have some examples, and for the folks at home, what I'll try to do is I'll take pictures and maybe some quick video clips of how they move of some models that we got from last year, just to kind of give you an idea of the types of things we're looking at, and I'll keep those out so we can look at those as we go. If y'all want to do breakout rooms, folks in the audience, sign into this so I can start creating those. So we can work on those other two documents.